November 9th, 2020. Hi, my name's Tom Yakopin, and this is the Tom Yakopin Podcast, a.k.a. Yakopinions. I should add the reason that we came up with that name is always keep in mind this is just my opinion. And so take it for what that is. Do your own research. I'd love to hear from you if you agree with my opinion and you want to be kind and edify and encourage. You can find us on YouTube. You can like us there. You can subscribe, share the podcast with a friend. You can also find us on Facebook as the Tom Yakopin Podcast. And again, the same thing. If you have feedback, positive or encouraging, obviously lovely. If you disagree, hey, we can agree to disagree. I'd love to know why. Obviously, you have a reason for feeling that way. Perhaps you wouldn't mind sharing what it is, and we could have an ongoing discussion. So here we are today. Current state of affairs. The election, of course, was Tuesday of last week. You know, I would say Wednesday for everybody was an interesting day on the Democrat side, on the Republican side, trying to figure out what exactly happened Tuesday night, what is happening. Thursday, you know, kind of the same. Where are we? Has anything been decided conclusively? And then Friday, etc. But I want to share something with you that I think is pretty interesting. And we're going to be all over the place today talking about different points that I believe are important for your consideration. But I got a message, a private message from a friend, and I'm going to keep his identity confidential just because. But this is a gentleman with a legal background who, for various reasons, decided that it was in the best interest of himself and his family to move to another country some while ago. And it's sad to say that in his own testimony, he feels safer outside of the United States than he does inside of the United States. But I would consider him an objective observer. I would consider him to be nonpartisan and somebody whose opinion, both legal and otherwise, from a political science standpoint, is somebody that, you know, I listen to what he has to say. Obviously, I take it with a grain of salt. But he emailed this to me pretty matter-of-factly, and I want to share it with you word for word. He said, look, here's my opinion. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, look for Biden to declare himself the next president as enough states report to give him 270 electoral votes. The paid Antifa and BLM rioters will now be paid to do massive and frequent public street celebrations. We will be told that this is everyday people celebrating Trump's loss. The media will move on from the election and begin talking exclusively about the upcoming Biden presidency. Biden will do a media blitz discussing all of the free things he will hand out. Talk about any fraud or corruption or election court cases will be silenced on television and by big tech, except for a passing legal expert who will give a non-biased opinion that Trump has no valid legal case. Trump will be talked about in the past tense. The goal of this next production will be to swing public perception to believing everything concerning the election is finished. My friend messaged me this 3 days ago. And I must say that appears to be exactly what's happening, which reminds me of a famous Ozzy Osbourne song. Everybody loves Ozzy, you know, the lead singer with Black Sabbath, and then went on his own with the epic band, including Randy Rhoads on lead guitar, Tommy Aldridge on drums. What a great Rudy Sarzo on bass. What a great band. You know, they wrote Crazy Train and on it went. But one of the lines in Crazy Train about the media is that the media sells it and you live the role. And I must say that I tend to agree with that the media seems to be bigger than merely reporting what is going on. Many of us grew up, of course, I was born in 1961, you do the math, but many of us grew up where the mainstream news played a very small role in the lives of the American family. In fact, it was very limited. I recall my parents watching the news at 5 or 6 in the evening and then maybe again at 11. And it usually ran 20 minutes, of actual news, 30 minutes runtime probably. Today, we have news channels 7 days a week, 24/7 of all types, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox, Newsmax, OAN, and on, just beating information down the American people's throats. And I don't know that I trust most of it. But at any rate, interesting what this gentleman sent me to consider. And then, of course, I begin to see this play out in light of the fact that the numbers still in many states, for example, we were just looking at some numbers before we went live today on the Washington Post site. And as of moments ago, Pennsylvania, the margin between Biden and Trump is 0.6%. That was just moments ago. The margin between Biden and Trump in Wisconsin, 0.7%. In Georgia, 0.2%. In Arizona, 0.5%. Michigan, a little over 1%. But the interesting thing is that we know that in several cases, these very close margins automatically trigger a recount. And add to that the fact that the president, including his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and others, are calling for investigation into voter fraud. So, again, we need evidence, but I find it interesting that the media has taken such a large role in this election to where they are actually calling things that are not as though they are. And I have to ask myself, are they reporting the news or are they reporting the narrative that they hope the American people follow so that we continue on the path to a predetermined outcome, whether it is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our president and vice president? Or is there more? Is there more malfeasance potentially lurking in the weeks and months to come? So it's kind of interesting. I should mention those of you who are tired of it. And can I be honest with you? I'm exhausted. I don't know how anybody who's lived throughout 2020 is anything other than exhausted, whether it's what seems like the phony narrative with the coronavirus in terms of the cases and the death rate, et cetera, and the mental exhaustion there, or the 4 years of Trump bashing and now the election. I mean, look, if you're worn out, I get it. I am too. I took the entire weekend and just unplugged and rode bicycles and looked at the river and walked in the leaves with my honey just to, get grounded and get my head on straight. But I want you to remember something. The media called Al Gore the president-elect for 30 days in the year 2000. 30 days until the court ruled differently and the American people didn't get Al Gore. On the contrary, we got George W. Bush as president. So for those of you who say, well, come on, Tom, I believe everything that's on the media. I mean, we've been lied to so many times on television, whether it is a pharmaceutical ad, whether it is a mainstream news narrative, whether it was the Al Gore debacle and the hanging chads in year 2000, or potentially right now. But I am of the opinion that the media, the mainstream news media, and the talking heads, including local radio, local personalities, I believe they're jumping the gun and they are taking upon themselves a role that is not for the media. The next president of the United States is not determined by CNN or Fox or your famous TV personality. The next president of the United States, if this entire election process is to be trusted, that is determined by the legal votes of you, the American people, we, the American people. It's no other way than that. And if it is, then what we have is an absolute sham. And I think you would agree. So what if, friends, there is malfeasance in our electoral process? What if it's been going on for some time now? My friend Brad and I were talking, we had dinner before shooting the show tonight, and I was saying, to me, I've been suspect of the entire strategy for some time. For example, as I've said here before, for those left-leaning progressives, and there are many angry, disenfranchised progressives that are as angry on the far left as the far right conservatives are. Why? Because for two presidential runs, Bernie Sanders, who is the champion, right, of many progressives in the United States, Bernie was used, if you will, to bring the far left-leaning progressives into the Democrat Party, only at the last minute to be ousted and 4 years ago replaced with Hillary, this year to be replaced with Biden. And I must tell you, there are many left-leaning progressives who are extremely angry and who feel just as disenfranchised on the far left as many of our conservative far right men and women feel as it relates the Trump election. Or in my case, years ago, I was a big Ron Paul fan. And I always felt that Ron Paul was blacklisted or obfuscated or overlooked in favor of a more, electable candidate. Another example might be somebody that I feel was a very noble candidate, and that's Tulsi Gabbard in the Democratic Party. I feel that Tulsi Gabbard was horribly blacklisted and obfuscated, overlooked. Here's an intelligent woman, a senator, right? A military veteran, a woman who could speak from the heart on matters that affect the American people. She didn't need talking points, and she didn't need to hide in the basement for 4 days to practice telling the American people what she believes, because she knows what she believes. I don't know. Friends, I have been suspect of the entire electoral process for some time. But this has given me, this hasn't added to my confidence what is going on now, especially, and let me just repeat that as of today, the lead in Wisconsin right now is 0.7% Trump down under Biden, which triggers an auto recount. In PA, 0.6%, Georgia 0.2%, Arizona 0.5%, and just a little over that in Michigan. So I want to ask you, do you feel that it is fair? Do you feel that it is right? Is it the right thing to do for the media to begin basically decreeing the next president when in fact we know that there is legal grounds for a recount and potentially legal grounds to look into voter fraud? What if what we are watching now is how a coup is actually planned and executed the world over? What if? Okay, just food for thought. And it's interesting when you study the word coup, or what a coup is, or coup d'etat, right? It's literally a blow of the state. It is basically an ousting or an overthrow or a takeover. It is the removal of an existing government from power, usually through violent means, but it could be through clever chicanery, shenanigans, sleight of hand, trickery, trickery, which brings me to this point. Now, I don't know much about these points, but I do want to challenge you to look into this. And if you are one seeking truth, you may want to Google hammer, okay, which was designed, as I understand it, by our own military intelligence to track terror groups under the guidance of the NSA. You may want to Google hammer and figure out what it was originally intended for, what it does, and determine for yourself, do you think that this is something that may be being used on the American people, along with Scorecard, which is apparently, again, a high-tech method of stealing elections or flipping votes at transfer points of the state election systems. You see, there's evidence that high-tech computer programs have been developed and deployed here in the USA, which, by the way, I believe are the same programs we've used to topple other legitimate elections around the globe to install our approved puppet regimes. What if that is in fact occurring? At any rate, I will say this, the mainstream news media is doing exactly what they're in place to do, and that's to tell you what to believe. You might be curious as to what I mean when I talk about nefarious actions behind all of this. What if there's even a larger global agenda, perhaps, that is exploiting the coronavirus and exploiting flaws in our election program? How many of you are familiar, for example, with the term the Great Reset? The Great Reset. And by the way, I'm going to mention a few websites you may want to visit. You can just Google the Great Reset and you'll learn a little bit about the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. But basically, the Great Reset is this. It is the fourth industrial revolution, many are calling it. But unlike the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and the information age, the Great Reset, otherwise known as the fourth industrial revolution, will be invoked by governments in a forceful manner without consent. In fact, it's interesting. I was studying online just today and have been looking into this for about 2 weeks now. A great article you may wish to read is on news.bitcoin.com. And this article goes into the fascist agenda behind the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum's reboot propaganda, which I believe, in all probability, if there are global hands involved, not only in the United States, but in India, in Europe, the Philippines, all around the world, I believe that this could be a big reason why the powers that be are exploiting every opportunity to undermine the sovereignty of the nations and thus weld them together in a brand new global order. Some call it the New World Order. Let me just quote a few things as we bring this to close. But again, this article is news.bitcoin.com on the Great Reset. And the author begins to say this: 2020 has been a wild ride during the last 10 months. The world moved in lockstep order to avoid the coronavirus outbreak. The government's reaction to COVID-19 created a different world, and the global economy has seen better days. During our last report during the IMF's call for a new Bretton Woods moment, news.bitcoin.com's finding discovered some of the Great Reset doctrines. The Great Reset concept is very similar to George Orwell's famous dystopian novel 1984, and some believe the subject is a borderline conspiracy theory. For instance, a website called greatreset.com has been floating around the web, catching people's attention this year. Additionally, a YouTube video published by the Corbett Report offers a guide to the so-called reboot. The Great Reset conversation is also quite topical, and discussions can be found on many social media avenues like Twitter, Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook. Likewise, websites like thegreatreset.com have sparked intense speculation about an upcoming financial reset where the global elite forcefully invoke the fourth industrial revolution. The coronavirus measures, coupled with purported climate change and statist propaganda, are considered the primers of this Great Reset concept. He goes on to say, in fact, the World Economic Forum has been promoting the concept for years, and back in November 2016, the WEF tweeted about 8 predictions for the year 2030. They predict a world where you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And the short clip says that everyone will rent everything they need. You know, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, friends, but I'll tell you what. I think there's a skunk in the wood pile somewhere. 2020 has been an odd year. There have been anomalies in the numbers. I have felt that there is an agenda behind the agenda with the outbreak of the virus, the way the media has politicized and weaponized the virus, bringing us right into this election period where now we are told to believe the reason for these statistical anomalies, the reason the vote is coming in the way that it is coming in, of course, is the mail-in ballot versus the in-person voting. But that gives me great pause because I feel as if that were orchestrated and potentially staged. My name's Tom Yakopin. This is the Tom Yakopin podcast, Yakopinions. This is just my opinion. It's food for thought. But I would like to hear from you. You can visit us online at YouTube. You can also visit us on Facebook at the Tom Yakopin podcast. I'd love your positive feedback. And of course, if you differ with my opinion, share with me why you feel that way, and perhaps we can have further discussion and come to a better conclusion. Thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.